Well, the top of the table game was always going to be the big ticket item this week. It finished Central Coast Mariners 2, Wellington Phoenix 1, and it was a game well worth of a potential grand final preview, perhaps. A win for the Phoenix would have almost put the Premier's plate beyond doubt. Even just a point would have seen them hold their advantage with 3 games left. And just as they thought they had done exactly that, up steps Mikhail Docker at the 11th hour to swing the premiership momentum towards the Mariners. Will, this was a brilliant game. 2 teams that will probably finish top 2 and would be good odds, you'd think, for making the grand final as well. A brilliant, game of football and hopefully just a taste of what's to come.
Absolutely, yeah. If this is the final, I don't think anybody will be mad at that. These teams have definitely performed this season and yeah, just been at the highest standard the most consistently. So they definitely deserve to be up the top. It's a shame to have Phoenix just slip kind of at the final hurdle, possibly. It seems Mariners might have the easier run-in of games after this one. But yeah, a great battle on the field and you just can't stop the momentum that the Mariners have, really. Just the form guide is looking good for them and yeah, it's in their hands now, really.
Yeah, it's looking very good indeed. Jacob, the last time these two teams played, we had a very interesting tactical conversation on Waitangi Day. It finished 0-0, and it was a very, patient and cautious and careful tactical battle. And that's what we saw in the kind of the first half of this game. But as what was probably predictable, one goal set things in motion, and it had to, it forced Wellington to try and go about things a different way. And I know you were keeping a keen eye on the formations and the tactics as well.
Yeah, so Phoenix went to 5 at the back in their formation in this game, and it's something that they've used a few times throughout the season, and they tend to use 2 quite advanced wing backs on either side of the back 3 to get up early. And typically you'll see Tim Payne there in the right wing back spot, but obviously he was injured, or he wasn't fit enough to be starting. At least he was on the bench. Yep. So that sort of, I think, played a little bit into why perhaps the Phoenix were a bit slow to get into the game. Sheridan had to start in that right wing back spot instead of Payne. And Payne's been one of those players who I think's been an unsung hero of this Phoenix side so far this year. He's extremely versatile, can be used well in attack, defends quite well, has a good work rate on him. So to lose a player like that, it's going to, throw a bit of a spanner in the works. But, it was a tense, tight first half, like you mentioned, Lockie, and it was one of those I guess sort of chess matches where every sort of little thing that happened was countered by the other team. So the Phoenix stayed quite deep for the most part in the first half, which we've seen them do away from home almost all season. They like to sit very, very deep and then launch into the counter. But I did notice that the main aim for them was to keep the ball in front. So rather than counter-attacking with some nice interplay through the middle, Ben Old dropping into the middle, that sort of thing, like we've seen in the past, that didn't happen so much in this game. They just instead tried to launch the ball forwards a bit earlier, keep the ball in front of them, keep their eyes on the ball at all times so the Mariners couldn't play in behind them or anything like that. The Mariners, to try and, battle that, in possession, they had like a 3-4-3, so they just really sort of loaded up in the midfield, and they had a lot of rotations. So they had the likes of, Quoll, who would move inside from the wing. Mikhail Docker, who you mentioned before, would overlap a lot on the wing. Nisbet dropped into midfield, sort of started out as almost sort of a false 9, dropped deep, and there were all these rotations going on. And another one was that Farrell was quite deep, and they played with that back 3, like I mentioned. And what that did was it just meant that the Mariners could control the tempo and control the pace of the game and control possession a little bit more. And it meant that as well they had those 3 back then if Phoenix did decide to counter. So it sort of was a bit of a stalemate there in that first half because of that. Another issue for Wellington was that Nicholas Pennington, who was playing as their defensive midfielder in this game, was very, very isolated because of the way that the Wellington were trying to play. He was just sort of the only player in the midfield for large parts of the game. And the Mariners, we know they like to press quite heavy. So he would receive the ball with his back to goal and be pressed by 2, sometimes 3 Mariners players and have no option but to go back to his defenders. So there wasn't that option to sort of progress the ball through the midfield. They had to look up the wings. And that's where the changes that Italiano made in the second half came to fruition. Of course, you mentioned that the first goal for the Mariners really sort of opened things up in the game, but the Wellington goal coincided with the change to the 4-4-2 that Italiano made.
Just before you go on as well, on that first goal, like, it's such small margins that you were talking about, every detailed matter. And Christian, it was just Wellington getting their defensive line slightly wrong one time, which allowed the ball from Docker to get to Rue, who was onside, being played on by someone on the other side of the field. Found the ball across and got the opening goal. It was such a small little detail that broke the deadlock.
Yeah, and what's really stood out for me this season, I think, has taken me a bit by surprise, is Wellington's defensive discipline and ability to, maintain a strong shape at the back, which, we saw obviously at the start of the season. We thought, oh yeah, they've found a bit of an identity, but for me, I had the assumption that they wouldn't be able to keep it up for the whole season. But as Jacob touched on, they started with 5 at the back. Use that shape, for the first half in particular. But then, like you mentioned, Lockie, it was just that split second sort of, I guess, lapse in concentration, you can call it, where, Doku was able to sort of split the pass for Rowe to put into the box for Torres, obviously, to head it home. But I feel as though for Wellington, they're just going to have to be on their guard for a full 90 minutes if they want to, sort of be engaged, because if they lack that defensive shape and discipline, like I mentioned before, then they're really, I guess, in trouble, for the rest of the match, because they're not a side that you sort of typically think that creates out-and-out chances like some of the other teams in the league who, just love to bomb forward and, sort of don't take the defensive aspect, not seriously, but they don't have it as a main sort of focus, you could call it. So, yeah, that was really interesting for me.
Yeah, you're right. They're a different team at home to what they are away as well, which we'll get onto. But yeah, Jacob, as you said, the shift from Italiano to that 4-4-2 coincided with their goal and got them back in the match.
Yeah, and it was just a bit of brilliance there from Italiano. And I mean, we've praised him so much throughout the season for good reason, but he sort of realised that having those 5 at the back, like Christian mentioned, it doesn't matter how many you have back if you're going to, it just takes one moment of individual brilliance from Mikhail Docker there to find that pass, find himself in space as well. He was doing a lot in terms of his movement where he was quite free on the ball to come inside if he had to. And when you're up against a strong, rigid defence, the best thing you can do is try and sow confusion in the back line. And that's what those movements from Docker inside did. And then, as you both explained, the goal really well taken. So Italiano would have looked at that and gone, right, do we need that many players back now, especially that we're a goal down and we're going to be chasing the game? So yeah, it makes that switch to the 4-4-2, takes Kelly Heald off, puts Van Hattem on, and of course Van Hattem absolutely pivotal in the goal, but it was
hell of a ball.
It was a really clever idea, because I think that the Phoenix did actually play the Mariners press quite well, especially when they got the ball wider. When they were trying to play through the middle with Pennington, like I said, he was often isolated and pressed quite heavy. But that's because they had a lot of focus on the wings, because they had the 5 at the back with the 2 wing backs getting forwards and stuff like that. So when they sort of moved towards that and looked to get the ball wider, they broke down the Mariners press quite well. And that's what they did here in the 4-4-2. It was a bit of nice play out on that right wing to get Van Hattem out into space. And because of that, the Mariners backline shifts across to cover that, which leaves Ben Old just all on his own in the middle of the box for what was a pretty simple finish in the end, but very well taken goal. And it's one of those things, it just, one tweak here or there can make the difference. But then when you've got a player like Mikhail Docker who's just on it in a game and can just seemingly do no wrong, it doesn't matter how many adjustments you make, because in the end of the day, he pulls out a brilliant goal in the 90th minute to win it. And you would feel hard done by if you were the Phoenix to go, oh, we made such a good change to get back into the game, and then it's one fantastic goal that buries us. But that's football for you, that's always going to happen. It doesn't matter how well you play. If there's one player on the other team who can just have that moment of brilliance, then it can always end badly for you. But I do think that, again, these two teams showing why they're the top 2 in the league, because it was just a really excellent battle and very fascinating.
It was one moment of brilliance, but what I will say is Italiano will be frustrated, because that was the 3rd or 4th time that Docker had a chance from that area of the ground in this game. And if you let someone, find their range from that kind of target area, well, then you're always running the risk of them knocking one in late at the game. So absolutely beautiful finish for Docker, but Italiano will be annoyed that they allowed that many chances from the same area. Let's take a look at the run home. So Central Coast and Wellington are now tied on 46 points. Central Coast are top of the league virtue of the wins tiebreaker. They have one more than Wellington, and they also have a little bit of goal difference as well, but that's very unlikely to come into play. So the games to go for Central Coast is Western United away from home, that's at Tarniat, Adelaide United at home, and then Newcastle away in the F3 Derby as well. And well, if you look at the general strength of those teams compared to the others we're going to talk about in a second, you'd assume that they're going to be easier for Central Coast. But if you look a little bit under the surface, I think all of these teams have very specific motivations for these games. The spirit at Western United is so high right now after their move down to Tarniat. They're playing full of confidence after a come-from-behind win against the Bulls. Adelaide are 3 wins in a row at the moment. If they win their 2 games before the Central Coast Clash, that'll be 5. We've talked about them being a confidence team. Their door will still be open for finals if they win those games. And then you get the Jets in the F3 Derby. Could you imagine if Newcastle had the chance to deny the Mariners the premiership on the final day of the season? You want to tell me that they're not going to want to play for that? So yes, these teams are lower down on the ladder, but they're all going to have their own motivations. And so it might not be as easy for the Central Coast as you might think.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no such thing as any teams being on the beach for the end of this season. Like as you said, Western United in their new facility looked really strong coming back against Macarthur. Like obviously a slow start, but very dangerous, just banging goals 4 in quick succession. And Adelaide, exactly, probably the best form out of the last 3 games. Mariners lost against Sydney, and yeah, Newcastle always a fiery F3 derby. It's just unpredictable. If you have to go there for your last game of the season and try and wrap up the title, it's all the players' legs will feel like jelly, honestly, for that one. It could go any way, especially with Jets tallying up Sydney as well. Like it's just not an easy game, even on paper if it seems that way. But yeah, what a run in and an exciting watch for everyone. Neutrals everywhere as well.
Absolutely. So then the Wellington Phoenix, they will host Melbourne Victory next weekend, then travel to the Newcastle Jets away and Macarthur FC at home to finish it off. So, Christian, as it turns out, the Newcastle Jets will play both of the top 2 teams in the last 3 rounds. They might have a big hand in deciding who wins the Premier's play.
Yeah, for sure. Like you touched on before, I think the Mariners, looking at it on paper, you think, okay, there's sort of 3 of the bottom teams, they should sort of wrap this up comfortably, but I'm sort of on the same sort of opinion as you guys to say that I think there are 3 real banana skins in the making, especially the F3 Derby in that final game. And let's not forget that Victory also have a slight chance of maybe, who knows, maybe causing an upset or 2 and at least making second position, for example, maybe even first, because just say for instance Victory beat Wellington 2 points behind the Phoenix. Who knows what happens with the Mariners? And then the Victory, I believe, have Brisbane and the Wanderers at home. So out of those 3 teams, Victory are the only team who have home games remaining, don't have to travel. So that's a big advantage for them to take for them. So, I mean, yeah, it's going to be extremely tight. I think if the Mariners pick up 4 points, then that eliminates Victory and they'll just have to compete with Phoenix mathematically. But yeah, it's going to be really close.
Yep, absolutely. So Melbourne Victory are the 3rd team and the final team that are mathematically still in the title. It is a long way to go. They're going to have to catch 2 teams that are 5 points above them. But definitely, if they win that match against Wellington Phoenix next week, that at least gives them a very big opportunity to crack the top 2, which is important for the finals equation. Let's do a quick poll. Jacob, who wins it from here?
Why'd you have to come to me first? This is so tough. Because that Victory Phoenix game is going to be, I think, the big. If Phoenix lose that, Mariners go on to win it, I reckon. I'm going to stick with Phoenix for now. But I think that game, depending on what happens there, is probably going to decide it.
Yeah, I'm on the Mariners train. I did just make that argument about the motivations of their teams, but I think especially with Melbourne Victory in the form they're in, I'm expecting them to take points off the Phoenix and Central Coast to get it done. Will?
I am going to say the Mariners. I think we see the motivations of the other teams, as you said, Lockie. But I saw them, the Mariners, celebrate that winner against Phoenix, and Angel Torres was going crazy. Docker was going crazy. They are so into it. They are so passionate, and kind of didn't expect it really to see that kind of stuff. So I reckon they've got the stuff to get it done from here.
Christian,
I don't want to change my mid-season prediction victory first, but I've got to say the Mariners from here because I believe victory will take points off the Phoenix. I've just got a feeling. They've performed very well against in the past 2 meetings, taken 2 draws off them so far. I know it's away from home, but we also have to take into consideration that the Mariners have that edge with the win total. So they've got, I believe, 14 wins, victory 10, Phoenix sitting, I think, 13. So that's a massive advantage. So maybe, 2 wins for the Mariners, and you'd probably say they're home.
All right, 3 for the Central Coast, and I think a rather generous, slightly contrarian Wellington from Jacob. I think we know where his heart truly lies. One other little bit of news on the Mariners side. Angel Torres' agent, Mauro Busquets, I believe is the name, tweeting on Monday that Torres will not renew his contract on the Central Coast. He apparently has official offers from 15 different countries. That is quite a staggering number. Torres was only signed on a 12-month deal, so no fee for the Mariners. Now, this is probably an example of their system working too well, to be honest. It's a large risk to sign one of these players on longer than a 12-month deal, especially when they're still so young and unproven. So he's managed to turn around in a remarkable period of time. So no chance for the Mariners to get him on a longer-term contract and earn a fee. But, Jacob, it's another example of the Mariners system working, and they won't get nothing out of this. They'll get another great increase in their reputation as a club that can develop young talent.
Well, and they could win some silverware off the back of his performances as well.
100%.
Which is the other thing. But I think what I read, and I can't confirm if this is the case or not, but that with Torres it was a 1+1 contract, but that the extra year was a player option. So
right.
That's always the risk you run with those ones, where if they feel like they're going to get a better offer somewhere else, they're going to turn down that option and go overseas. But like you said, Lockie, it is a case of the Mariners showing everybody else in the league how to, run a football club, basically. They're taking these players from overseas who they're not 33 years old and past their best. They've got something to work towards. They've still got their career ahead of them. They've got that fight, and they're from places that, historically have produced some very, very good footballers. And, they keep doing a really good job of just producing this talent and nurturing it. And I think as well, the other thing is they manage expectations well, the Mariners. We see a lot of clubs in the league sort of, the hype gets to some of the players, and we've spoken about Nestor Irankunda a lot of times with this same sort of thing, and it's the Mariners seem to manage that a lot better than some of the other clubs in the league. So it'll be a shame for them, but like I said, they could they're on for a treble this year, so it's a tough one, and it would be bittersweet for him to leave for the Mariners, I'm sure, but they'll also take, winning the Premiership, the Championship, and potentially winning in Asia as well.
Yes, I know Mariners fans are very hesitant to talk about it, but the treble word that you mentioned there is well and truly on the cards. Very exciting time. Will, I see you get a little grin through the teeth there. But no, very exciting month ahead for the Mariners.